Hello everyone and welcome to my long distance learning channel, Mr.Markoteach. This will be episode 10. We are going to be looking at Shakespeare's Macbeth Act 2 this week. There are 4 scenes in this episode, this act. So we will be able to fly through this one and probably finish it in only 2 videos for this week. Okay, so what is going to happen in Act 2, Scene 1 is probably the most famous. It's on the cover of the book. We have the floating dagger. Is this a dagger which I see before me? We get that very famous line. There's a few very famous lines in this play, or scenes, moments in this play, and this is probably the first of the most famous ones. We will look at a cartoon summary from Nerdstudy. I like their presentation, very straightforward, using some of the actual lines from the play. Then there will be 2 interpretations, one by Patrick Stewart, doing more of a modern interpretation. It's a film version. There will be, not in this scene I don't believe, but in some of the other scenes that I have chosen, there's like guns instead of swords and things. It's a very modern interpretation. Then there's one from Ian McKellen, a very famous Shakespearean actor. You'll know him from, he played Magneto, and he was also Gandalf the Grey. Patrick Stewart is famous for being from Star Trek, as opposed to some other things too, as well as being in, I just forgot what it was called. All right, so Patrick Stewart is from the X-Men, and also Ian McKellen was Magneto in X-Men as well. So you may recognize them from those films as well. Okay, there is a worksheet, a study guide that is on Google Classroom that has to do with this very famous "Is this a dagger?" which I see before me. Trying to analyze the deepness, the symbolism of what this dagger may represent and the seriousness of the scene. He and his wife are gearing up to kill King Duncan, and this may be his consciousness. Why does he see or hallucinate this dagger? A lot of analysis can go into that. There is a vocabulary exercise that's been posted as well. There'll be 2 vocabulary this week, and probably just 2 videos this week, and probably 2 worksheet study guides prompts to answer, to be found on Google Classroom. Make sure that you are turning them in or submitting them after you complete them. Some of you are not, and they stay sort of in this, they've been assigned and it doesn't look like they've been completed. You have to hit return or share it with me, or at a bare minimum, at least send me an email. Let me know that you have completed the assignments. Okay, without any further ado, here is Act 2, Scene 1, very famous, the floating dagger. I hope you enjoy it.
Banquo and his son Fleance is having a conversation about how bright the moon has been shining, and about how Banquo has been having a hard time falling asleep. Macbeth enters the scene, along with a servant. Banquo tells Macbeth that the king must be feeling unusually generous lately. He delivers a diamond that Duncan had requested to be given to Macbeth in return for his wife being a most kind hostess. Banquo then tells Macbeth that he's been having dreams about the 3 witches that they have seen earlier on in the play. Banquo realizes that some of what the witches foretold actually did come true. But Macbeth blocks the conversation short with his cunning act by saying, "I think not of them." Macbeth then tells Banquo that they shall speak in further detail of a proposition Macbeth has for Banquo. He says that this idea can be talked about later on, and that it will benefit Banquo in some way. Banquo says that he'll do whatever Macbeth has in mind, so long as it is not morally wrong to do so. And as Banquo and Fleance leaves, Macbeth commands his servant to tell Lady Macbeth to ring the bell when his drink is ready. All alone, Macbeth is left to his thoughts. Suddenly, he sees an illusion in front of him. A dagger, floating in the air, with its handle so readily pointed towards him, and the tip of the dagger pointing towards the direction where Duncan is fast asleep. But when Macbeth tries to reach out to grab the dagger, he simply cannot seem to do so. Macbeth realizes that the dagger was just an illusion, and towards the end of his thoughts, we can see that he just wants to get through with the killing as soon as possible. He feels that while he continues to merely mutter things to himself, on and on about Duncan's death, Duncan himself isn't in any way more dead than before. He says the longer he waits, the more he finds himself to be less motivated to kill Duncan, as time has a way of cooling off his courage and his ambition. And right at that moment, Lady Macbeth rings the bell. This is Macbeth's cue. The bell serves as a call from Lady Macbeth to Macbeth, saying that the next steps to the killing is ready to take place. The king's men are asleep, and now Macbeth must head off to finally commit the crime that he has been contemplating over and over again.
I go, and it is done. The bell invites me. Hear it not, Duncan, for it is a knell that summons thee to heaven or to hell.
Is this a dagger which I see before me? The handle toward my hand. Come. Let me clutch thee. I have thee not. And yet I see thee still. Art thou not fatal vision sensible to feeling, as to sight? Or art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation, proceeding from the heat-oppressed brain? I see thee yet. Thou marshallest me the way that I was going, and such an instrument I was to use. Mine eyes are made the fools of the other senses, or worth all the rest. I see thee still, and on thy blade and dudgeon gouts of blood that was not so before. There's no such thing. It is the bloody business which informs thus to mine eyes. Now, o'er the one-half world, nature seems dead, and wicked dreams abuse the curtain's sleep. Now witchcraft celebrates pale Hecate's offerings, and withered murder, alarmed by his sentinel, the wolf, whose howls his watch, thus with his stealthy pace, with Tarquin's ravishing stride towards his design, moves like a ghost. Thou sure and firm set earth, hear not my steps which way they walk, for fear thy very stones prate of my whereabouts, and take the present horror from the time which now suits with it. Whilst I threat, he lives. Words to the heat of deeds too cold breath gives. I go, and it is done. The bell invites me. Hear it not, Duncan, for 'tis a knell that summons thee to heaven Is this a dagger, which I see before me? The handle toward my hand. Come, let me touch this. Have they not? I need to see this done. Art thou not fatal vision, sensible to feeling as to sight? Or art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation proceeding from the heat-oppressed brain? I see thee yet, in form as palpable as this, which now I drew. The marshals know the way that I was going, and such an instrument I was to use. Mine eyes are made the fools of the other senses. All else worth, all the rest. See thee still. And on thy blade and dudgeon gouts of blood, which was not so before. There's no such thing. It is the bloody business which informs thus to mine eyes. For the one half-world nature seems dead, and wicked dreams abuse the curtained sleep. Witchcraft celebrates pale Hecate's offerings, and withered murder, alarmed by his sentinel, the wolf, whose howls his watch thus, with his stealthy pace, with Tarquin's ravishing stride, toward his design moves, like a ghost. A sure and firm said earth, hear not my steps which way they walk, for fear thy very stones prate of my whereabouts, and take this present horror from the time which now suits with it. As I threat, he lives. I go, and it is done. The bell invites me. Hear it not, Duncan. If it is a knell that summons thee to heaven or to hell.
I hope you enjoyed Act 2, Scene 1, the floating dagger. Very famous scene. I hope the Patrick Stewart and the Ian McKellen interpretations were worthy of those scenes. I believe that they were. Moving on. Act 2, Scene 2. We now get Lady Macbeth preparing for murder, and Macbeth carries it out. They're going to use the literary device of allusion in this scene. I mean, Shakespeare does a lot of allusions. Allusions are basically referencing some historical or other literary famous piece into the literary work, and therefore it's an allusion. So the reader or the viewer needs to be hip to that allusion that they are making. So Shakespeare is going to talk about all of Neptune's oceans, and then you would have to know your Greek and Roman mythology to know who Neptune was. We're talking about Poseidon, and that is an allusion. So just making a little connection there. The first one we're going to look at for Act 2, Scene 2 is from the Royal Shakespeare Company. It will be Macbeth, Lady Macbeth and Macbeth kind of preparing and carrying out King Duncan's murder, and then there will also be a Nerdstudy cartoon sort of summary explanation of what has gone down. Sorry, I'm not sure of the order. It might be the other way around. It might be Nerdstudy first, and then the Royal Shakespeare Company second. These have a worksheet that connects to them. Study guide, it's on Google Classroom for the floating dagger, and some analysis and questions, prompts for Act 2, which may get posted on Tuesday. Hopefully this video is going to roll on Monday.
I am afraid they have awaked, and 'tis not done. The attempt and not the deed confounds us. Hark! I laid their daggers ready. He could not miss him. Had he not resembled my father as he slept, I had done it. My husband?
I have done the deed. Didst thou not hear a noise?
I heard the owl scream and the crickets cry. Did not you speak?
When?
No.
As I descended? Hark! Who lies in the second chamber?
Donald Bain?
This is a sorry sight.
Foolish thought to say a sorry sight.
There's one did laugh in sleep, and one cried murder. That they did wake each other. I stood and heard them, but they did say their prayers and address them again to sleep.
There are two lodged together.
One cried, God bless us, and amen the other, as they had seen me, with these hangman's hands. Listening their fear, I could not say amen when they did say God bless us.
Consider it not so deep.
Wherefore could I not pronounce amen? I had most need of blessing, and amen is stuck in my throat.
His deeds must not be thought after these ways, so it will make us mad.
Methought I had a voice cry, sleep no more. Macbeth does murder sleep. The innocent sleep that knits up the ravelled sleeve of care. The death of each day's life, sore labour's bath, balm of hurt minds. Great nature's second course, chief nourisher in life's feast.
What do you mean?
Still it cried, sleep no more to all the house. Glamis hath murdered sleep, and therefore Cawdor shall sleep no more. Macbeth shall sleep no more.
Who was it that thus cried? Why, worthy Thane, you do unbend your noble strength to think so brain-sickly of things. Go get some water and wash this filthy witness from your health. Why did you bring these daggers from the place? They must lie there. Go carry them and smear the sleepy grooms with
I'll go no more. I'm afraid to think on what I've done. Look on't again, I dare not.
Infirm of purpose. Give me the daggers. Sleeping and the dead are but as pictures. 'Tis the eye of childhood that fears a painted devil. If he do bleed, I'll gild the faces of the grooms withal, for it must seem their guilt.
Whence is that knocking? How is't with me when every noise appalls me? What hands are here? Ah, they pluck out mine eyes. Will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand? No. This my hand will rather the multitudinous seas incarnadine, making the green one red.
My hands are of your colour, but I shame to wear a heart so white. I hear a knocking at the south entry. Retire we to our chamber, a little water clears us of this deed. How easy is it then? Your constancy hath left you unattended. Hark! More knocking! Put on your nightgown lest occasion call us, and show us to be watchers. Be not lost so poorly in your thoughts.
To know my deed, 'twere best not know myself. Wake Duncan with thy knocking. I would thou couldst.
This scene starts off with Lady Macbeth. She has already rang the bell to cue her husband in for the killing. The king's men are asleep, and all that is left is for Duncan to be murdered. She is almost excited at the thought of Duncan dying. But at that moment, she hears a voice cry out. The thought that her husband might have failed in the task of killing the king worries her. She thinks to herself that she would have murdered King Duncan, but the sight of Duncan sleeping reminded her of her very own father, and so she couldn't manage to commit the act herself. At this point, Macbeth enters the room with a bloody dagger and says,
I've done the deed. Didst thou not hear noise?
It turns out to be the case that Lady Macbeth was not the only one to hear the voice cry out. Macbeth had heard it too, and it frightened him more than just a little. He then goes on to tell his wife that he heard a servant laugh in his sleep as another one cried out, "Murder!" Apparently, according to Macbeth at least, the two servants woke each other up and then went back to sleep. At this point, we can't help but wonder if Macbeth is hallucinating again, as he was hallucinating when he saw the floating dagger in Act 2, Scene 1. The story becomes even more bizarre when Macbeth says that one of the servants cried out, "God bless us!" and the other replied, "Amen." Macbeth emphasizes over and over again that he could not reply amen to what these servants were saying. And when Lady Macbeth tells him not to consider these matters so deeply, Macbeth continues to be glued to the idea of not being able to say amen at that very moment. while Lady Macbeth continues to tell her husband to stop thinking about these things and just calm down. Macbeth continues to press on about hearing random voices that apparently cried out things like, "Sleep no more, Macbeth is murdering sleep." But Lady Macbeth's support for her husband turns into sheer disappointment and almost belittling disgust as she realizes that the bloody dagger, which was supposed to be left with the sleeping guards in order to frame them, was carried all the way into their room. It's obvious that the dagger needs to be placed near the guards, but Macbeth is clearly shaken at this point. He says,
I'll go no more. I am afraid to think what I've done. Look on it again, I dare not.
Scolding her husband, Lady Macbeth takes the dagger and decides to deal with the matters herself. She tells her husband that the dead and the sleeping are no different than just pictures, which is clearly different from how she was feeling earlier on when she was confessing to herself that she couldn't manage to kill the king because he looked like her father. Clearly, the dead and the sleeping are at least a little bit more than just pictures, not just to Macbeth, but also to Lady Macbeth. Lady Macbeth leaves in order to frame the sleeping men, and from the distance, a loud knocking noise starts to scare Macbeth. Macbeth becomes intensely frightened and once again starts to hallucinate as he stares at his hand and says,
What hands are here? Ah! They pluck out mine eyes!
But his rambling about random illusions gets interrupted by Lady Macbeth's arrival again. Her hands are all bloody, and she says,
My hands are of your color, but I shame to hear a heart so white.
As the knocking seems to continue, Lady Macbeth says that she thinks she heard someone from the south entrance knocking at the gate. And regarding the blood on her hands, she figures that a little water clears us this deed, and orders her husband to put on his nightgown and go back to bed. But will it actually be as simple as that? Will a little water actually clear them of their deeds? This is something that we will soon find out. The scene ends with regret as expressed by Macbeth.
Oh, to know my deed, 'twere best not to know myself. Wake Duncan with thy knocking, I would thou couldst.
That concludes Act 2, Scene 2, the preparation and the carrying out of the murder of Duncan. I hope it was very straightforward. I hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. If you are a current student, please make sure that you hit the notification bell as well to be notified when a new lesson drops on YouTube. Keep it classy in the comment section and have a wonderful rest of your day or night, depending on when you watch this. Mr. Markowitz, OUT, out.
Another one bites the dust.